Gale of Waterdeep. A perfect example of how men do not get acknowledged enough for the abuse that they have endured. Hi, my name is Stormborn. I've been playing Baldur's Gate for some time, enjoyed it quite a bit. As much as I can appreciate every companion that the game has introduced, Gale of Waterdeep, a charming little wizard, has caught my attention the most. At glance, he is the sarcastic, happy-to-go man, always joking around, trying to do the right thing. But the more you get to know him, the more you slowly uncover his trauma, as much as he, himself, is trying to deny it. Honestly, I thought that Gale would be liked by many people. I genuinely expected him to be one of the most chosen companions and one of the most romanced ones, but to my surprise I've been seeing him getting more hate than I anticipated. Some people call his way of speaking way too annoying and complicated, some people call him clingy and creepy, mostly due to the glitch that would skyrocket his approval of you, probing him to romance you. Genuinely, it is okay to dislike some companion in favor of the other one, but I could not get rid of the feeling that people just despise his guts unjustifiably. One of the main reasons, besides the one that I covered earlier, is that people hate his obsession with Mystra, the goddess of magic he happened to romance. I saw people complain that he just cannot stop talking about her even while you romance him, and I can't help but wonder if people were paying attention to his story at all. And I cannot blame them, as Gale always portrays his romance with Mystra as something so special, so unique, and as something to be proud of. But let me explain to you why you should be able to judge the story for yourself, rather than simply listen to what he is saying. Gale is a talented wizard, so talented that he got attention from Mystra herself for his talent of channeling the weave. The story says that he is so powerful that he could potentially destroy a whole village by basically sneezing in its direction. However, we all need to remember that he got attention from Mystra at a very young age. If I am not mistaken, the first time Mystra clawed onto him was when he turned 16. Ever since then, Mystra was feeding him all kinds of praise, prompting him to seek power, and showing him that he can become Mystra's chosen and, mind you, started romancing him ever since. It is not a secret that Gale was not the first, however, if you really think of it, such revelation can seriously mess with the mind of a teenager. Not only it might boost the self-esteem, but also make him think that he is better than anyone else. And I assure you, it is exactly what Mystra wanted. By giving him some form of attention, minimum affection, she had Gale on the hook. And Gale, as a boy obsessed with magic, who has been worshipping Mystra before he even met her, didn't require much effort in getting hooked. But here comes the problem: as much as it is uplifting to get a praise from a literal goddess of all magic, it is also as equally devastating to get any kind of critique or a cold shoulder. Mystra was messing with his mind, making him feel like no matter how well he does, he can always do better as he has so much potential. With such authority, Gale would believe her, and it would make him always chase something more to impress her rather than settle and appreciate what he has. It is also a reason to why the whole mess with the all began in the first place. People seem to call Gale power-hungry, which, as any companion in the game, it is possible for him to go down the route, but they seem to forget one important detail. Gale thought that the orb was a missing relic of Mystra's magic, and he wanted to, yet again, impress her by bringing it back. Please remember that Gale was still a young adult, if not a teenager, when this has happened, and it would all be resolved if Mystra would not shatter his self-esteem as much as she did. So he made a mistake, and the orb became his burden, and yet again, rather than explain this to her chosen one, she basically banished him and left him with no answers for many years to come. Gale isolated himself to keep people around him safe with nothing but the books and the cat for the company. Sorry, a friend. I think I do not need to mention how that can play with your mind too, but in spite of all, Gale's blind loyalty and obsession with Mystra kept him wanting for more attention, more answers, so he kept seeking more power and more ways to get Mystra's approval. At the day you first meet him, this is the first time he has been amongst people, yet he still kept his jolly appearance, messing around with the main character and appreciating everything that surrounds him. I do not know if this is obvious just yet, but Mystra has basically groomed the kid. If we look at the very definition of grooming, grooming is when someone builds a relationship, trust and emotional connection with a child or a young person so they can manipulate, exploit and abuse them. And it is most prominent when it comes from the place of high authority. I think I do not need to explain that in a fantasy setting there is no higher authority than the god or the goddess, yet for one reason or another this seems to be not taken serious, and I think I have an explanation as to why. When you talk to Gale about Mystra, or when you let him talk about her first, he is still full of admiration, obsession, and the unending pride. There is still some bitterness lingering somewhere in him, yet it is not as powerful as any other feeling he has towards her. I've noticed people basically hating him for saying something like, yeah, I banged Mystra, that's pretty cool, right? But think of it this way. Wouldn't Mystra want him to think that it's pretty cool? And who are we to say that it was the real Mystra he had an intimate moment with? For all we know, she might have conjured an illusion to satisfy him and feed into his ego. If the romance between them was as real as Gale thinks it was, do you really think that Mystra would just abandon him with no answers for a mistake such as this? After all, Gale was young and had barely any experience. All he had was wizards such as him, or more powerful than him, and her. If she truly cared about putting him to a right path rather than using him for her needs, the outcome would be ever so different. I would also like to address that people do not think of it as a simple coping mechanism. Even if you look at the society these days, most of the time when a man comes with a confession of, say, a woman taking advantage of him, it is often met with, wow, dude, you got lucky, rather than with serious concern. Who are we to say that Gale, rather than simply reflect and try to recognize his relationship with Mystra as an illusion, didn't just decide to get along with it and be proud instead? Even then, when you romance him further, he is slowly realizing that it was not as real as he once thought. In Gale's own words, there is no love between us. I was not the first, and I certainly won't be the last. Gale finally, ever so slowly, starts to understand that he was simply used by Mystra for his talent. Being a deity means that you are only powered by the followers you still have. It isn't the god's intentions to keep people interested in them, or they will lose power. Using Gale, knowing that he was an extremely talented wizard, was in Mystra's interests. She does not give him answers, but keeps him interested in her enough to keep her in her claws, spreading more words of her, attracting more people to follow her godhood. There was no real romance, she was interested in his power more than himself, and you can help him realize that. But with such dynamic comes a price, which also becomes more prominent when you play the game further. Gale never feels good enough. With the first chance he can sacrifice himself for a greater good, he takes it. He has no real appreciation of his life, he does not take it as something valuable, he is deeply depressed and traumatized. When a person moves away from the environment that scarred them, it can become extremely overbearing, difficult and overwhelming. People also seem to act as if it is weird that with any kind of hurt, Gale's first reaction is to blow himself up. It doesn't take much to know that he won't do it if it were to mean that someone can get hurt, but he is saying that because, maybe, partially, he wanted to die. He has finally found appreciation amongst other people who are not wizards like him, people who do not know him well, and people who do not want him to constantly be the best version of himself. He falls in love with Taff because Taff is showing him kindness and proving to him that he does not have to be someone that he is not to be loved. In that very vulnerable state, any kind of hurt or rejection hits you more. Not to mention that the only time he ever says it was after the night he spent with you. After he opened up, shared his fears, more of his past, even said out loud that, in truth, he does not want to die. He let himself be vulnerable, the most vulnerable he has probably been in years, so it is not a question of his ego being hurt, it is a situation where a man who always kept to himself has finally let someone in and got hurt. I am sure that one of us at one point in life said something like, well, I guess I go die, as a joke. This is the only way Gale knows how to respond, joking about his pain. He does not mean it, but says it anyway, because it is the first thing that came to his mind. He has been a very reserved companion through the whole time, always seemed to know what to say, and he acted on an emotion after a very emotional night. It is also a fact that, even while he is slowly realizing that Mystra used him, he does not mind dying because she asked him to do so. That does not only prove a point that Mystra doesn't have any real regard to him other than a tool, but also that she was using him for her own sake. With the Absolute getting more followers, her power also weakens. The Absolute is a threat. Not only because of the infection and danger to mere humans, but also to her godhood. And who better to deal with it than the man she has so methodically conditioned to do as she wishes. You would think that a goddess as powerful as Mystra could try to take care of things on her own, and yet again the only time Mystra ever gives him any answers is when she needs him to be used. That is, yet again, a definition of the grooming. Gale will do anything for a little bit of appreciation, anything to be noticed, and we cannot blame him. This is why you, a player, as a TAF, have a power in you to make him realize that he, as he is now, is valid. It is almost as if Gale forgot that he is such a talented wizard after all the stuff with Mystra. You, as a player, have it in you to remind him. And once you do, Gale slowly separated himself from Mystra as her ex-lover and only answers to her as his deity. After all, she is a goddess of all magic. It will be hard to reject her entirely. Victims of grooming or any kind of abuse often can't let go of the person who harmed them. They will talk about them, they will mention them, they might even try to grasp onto good things or make it seem like bad things that happened weren't really all that bad. Combine that with a constant feeling of never being good enough and not knowing genuine kindness outside of his very small circle, and you have Gale, a charming, sarcastic, jolly wizard who is also as ever troubled. Moving on to the other topic to why people seem to judge Gale for is that once a chance arrives, he starts grasping onto godhood, wishing to become a god himself. It is also in that situation where he starts to say that he would have the power to completely overthrow Mystra. People seem to criticize him for his hunger for power and also altogether call him ungrateful. I would like to add another opinion on that. While Gale is slowly realizing that he was being used, he went through all 5 stages of grief. But here comes the other one that is mentioned much less: revenge. He wants to show Mystra that she was wrong about him. He wants to prove her that all this time he was good, if not better than her. On top of that, he is trying to still fix his never-ending self-esteem issues. While he is seeking godhood, he still thinks that him, as he is now, will never be good enough. And only by becoming god he can truly become worthy of anything. If you romance him, he later apologizes to you, but also asks to let him explain to you why the godhood would be good for him and you as a couple. Gale wants to give you everything, the entire world. He wants to be the very best version of himself for you, his lover. He thinks that he can only achieve that by becoming a god. He does not realize that maybe, without it, he can still be a valuable partner. He even talks to you about it, openly, saying that you deserve better. It is yet again in your power to remind him that you do not need him to be anything more than he is now. And, rather than with anger, he answers to you with a surprise. He truly, genuinely can't believe that you would take him as he is now. This is how deeply his trauma runs in his mind. And once he finally believes you, this is where he finally comes down. This is finally when he accepts himself and lets it all go. He is not repaired by all means, but he is on his path towards healing. All because you, a player, convinced him and reminded him of his value. I think Gale's approach towards things have deeply changed the perception of the players. Because he is in so much denial, people seem to just go along with what he says. He is proud of sleeping with Mystra, so people take it for this. Gale might not be your type, or even the most interesting companion to you comparing to others, but I truly genuinely think that the hate he has received has been a little too much. Every companion has a burden. Everyone expresses it differently, on their own pace. Gale has chosen the approach that makes the most sense in his situation. He is just a guy who was thrown into a mess made by the goddess he worshipped at a very young age. He is just someone who is trying to do good. And I hope that a small essay such as this helped and shed some light on his story. Men can be groomed, they can be taken advantage of. I think it is our duty to also recognize it and show a little patience. After all, Gale is not the first example of such abuse, and sadly won't be the last. Thank you so much for watching and listening, whatever you were doing with this video. This is my first time ever writing something like this. I've never done a video or essay about anything, so I'm not sure if we're gonna do this more in the future, but if you like it and want me to do something like that again, please do let me know. But until then, it is all for today, so thank you again, have a good day and bye bye!